Hi everyone. Here we're going to be talking about the diencephalon, which is one of the structures that's part of the brain. That the diencephalon is going to be divided in three parts: the epithalamus, the thalamus, and the hypothalamus. Usually we just talk about the thalamus and the hypothalamus because they have several different functions. The epithalamus is sort of basically where the pineal gland is going to be located, and there's not much to talk about it, so that's why when we talk about the diencephalon, we usually just mention the thalamus and the hypothalamus. But nevertheless, here's our epithalamus. So like the name says, epi, on top of the thalamus, and it's going to be this compartment right over here. So here's your thalamus, therefore this compartment right over here is going to be your epithalamus. And if you look closely, you can see that the epithalamus is going to be where your third ventricle is going to be located. And the other structure that we can find on the epithalamus that's important is going to be your pineal gland. So your pineal gland is important, especially because it produces melatonin. Okay, and therefore it also regulates your day and night cycle. So that's what you should know about the epithalamus. Now let's talk about the thalamus. Now the thalamus is a little bit more complex, basically because it has several different structures to it. It's going to be formed by the walls also of the third ventricle, and there is going to be a right and left, what we call a right and left thalamus, and they're going to be divided by the interthalamic adhesion. So there's going to be like a little dot that we call interthalamic adhesion, and therefore on one side of the hemisphere you're going to have the right thalamus, on the other side of the hemisphere you're going to have the left thalamus. So that's why we say there's a right and left thalamus. As you can see, it has sort of this egg-shaped structure right over here, and it has several different compartments. Okay, several different compartments. And if you can look over here, we're going to have an anterior, what we call anterior group, a medial group, a ventral group, a posterior group that's subdivided into three other groups, and a lateral group. You don't need to know any of these functions. Okay, so this part you don't need to know, or this table you don't need to know. Okay, because I don't want you memorizing any of this. But you should know that that in the thalamus, that's where about 95% of your sensory information is going to be passing through the thalamus. And we did talk about this previously, and from here you should know where it goes to. Okay, so you should know that it's going to go to structures that are going to be located posterior to the central sulcus. Here we have the hypothalamus, so like the name says, hypo, below the thalamus. It's going to be an important structure, basically because it's going to have certain structures that are going to be important for production of different types of hormones. And here you can see all the main functions of the hypothalamus, so you can see how important the hypothalamus is. It's going to secrete lots of different types of hormones, and we don't cover the endocrine chapter, but you should know that the hypothalamus is important for a lot of the main functions, like control blood pressure, control of heart rate, sort of tells you if you're hungry, if you're thirsty, your sexual desire, things like that. Okay. There are a few structures that I want you to know. Basically, the hypothalamus is going to form the floor of the third ventricle. So here's your thalamus right over here. So here's your thalamus. So on top of the thalamus, you're going to have your epithalamus, and therefore your hypothalamus is going to be right over here below the thalamus. A few structures that we want to know about is the first one, your infundibulum, right over here, which basically is going to connect the hypothalamus to your pituitary gland. And your pituitary gland is going to be important for lots of different hormonal secretions too. There's going to be a structure called the mammillary body right over here, and this mammillary body is going to be located on the posterior wall of the hypothalamus. And I guess that's it for the hypothalamus, but I did highlight all the different structures that are linked to your hypothalamus, all the different nuclei, and basically their functions are all laid out in this table. But just when you think about the hypothalamus, I want you to think about a lot of survival functions, like I mentioned previously. So heart rate, blood pressure, things like that. Okay, things in general.